at the Arbor Day Foundation. He spent more than 20 years in the philanthropic sector. In that time, he shared countless cups of coffee and conversations with people from all walks of life. He especially enjoys helping people articulate their personal stories through their philanthropy. After his talk, I think it's going to be pretty informal, so he may allow questions while we're going, but there'll also be time at the end for some QA. And now for Mr. Keim.
If I can interject, if you have questions, Mr. Keim will indicate whether you can unmute yourselves to say them, but otherwise you can put your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to them one way or the other. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Keim.
No, thank you. And please call me James. Barry was very kind. He unmuted me, which Drew knows is something I have a lot of trouble with whenever I'm doing one of these Zoom calls, is that I often start talking without unmuting myself. So thanks for doing that for me and keeping me on track. I want to thank Barry, Bruce, Lois. The three of you have been very helpful in helping me understand more about your group. And I am very excited to be here and be part of this because the work that you're doing is really important. And I was asking a lot of questions about the work that you were doing with the acorns, because that work especially is something that has given you the opportunity to really see the challenges that are facing us as we move forward in trying to get to some of the goals that we want to achieve. So I'm going to start this by sharing my screen here. Okay, can you see my slide here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so again, the title of the talk is What Does It Mean to Plant 100 Million Trees? What's next? And part of the reason that I made this the title is because, one, I was kind of talking through what sort of topics you were interested in as a group, and found out that one of the reasons that you'd selected us to have this conversation with you is because of the breadth of our work. And so part of what this topic allows me to do is to talk a little bit more about what that breadth looks like. But before I do that, I need to talk about why I do the work that I do. And part of that is these people right here. Now, that is me in this picture, and beside me is my wife smiling. And I would tell you that I'm very fortunate to have her smiling in this photo, because I was supposed to arrange to have a photographer take this picture so that we could use it for our Christmas cards or our holiday cards. I did not get a photographer arranged for that. And so this was me setting it up on our front porch. But one of the things that I just wanted to point out is that this is the reason I do my work. I met my wife when we were in college, and 31 years ago, we were co-chairs of a group called the Social Concerns Committee. The two of us ended up starting an Amnesty International group, a college chapter of Nebraskans Against the Death Penalty. We worked with protests and rallies. We organized the big college campus-wide lecture series on commemorating the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. And her big plan in life was to go and work in the Peace Corps, become a physician, go and work in the Peace Corps in India. And my plan was to become a college literature professor, and then we got married. And so those things did not happen, but instead we had these two wonderful children. And today she is a family practice physician. She is here in Lincoln. And 2 years ago, after I spent more than 20 years working in higher education and fundraising, I had the opportunity to come back and work with Drew and a lot of the other amazing people that work at the Arbor Day Foundation, and it felt like coming home. But I wanted to show this picture to kind of start out, because this is the reason I do it, is these two kids here. And what you'll notice is that my son, Mason, is sitting there with an Arbor Day hat on. There was probably no one more proud when I came to work at the Arbor Day Foundation than him. And he wears that hat all the time. So this was the picture that went out in our holiday cards. But it's because to him, I was finally back to doing something that meant something to him. And so I don't know the reasons that you're interested in these topics, but I've had a long history of being interested in what we can do to really preserve the earth and make the earth a great place for my own children to grow up, and hopefully someday grandchildren as well. So that's why I do what I do. I wanted to share this quotation with you because, as I said, I've worked in philanthropy for a long time. And coming back to the Arbor Day Foundation for me was this opportunity to really connect two passions of mine, because for me, philanthropy has become something that has been the way that I figured out we can do a lot of the things that I thought we could do through putting together protests or marches, that sort of thing. There were ways to bring people together. And to me, this quotation gets at both of those things. It gets at the ability of trees, one, to be something that go well beyond us, but also our philanthropy at the same time. So to me, this quotation brings together the two passions that I have, one for trees, the other for philanthropy. And I can talk to you especially about the philanthropy side for quite a while. If you want to talk really detailed about trees, there are arborists that you should probably be talking to more than me in this case. But here's the thing about philanthropy. If you take a look at philanthropy in the United States, we are second to none as far as the amount that we give willingly to charities. And it's amazing the amount that we're able to give, you know, close to 450 billion in 2019. And I'm sorry I don't have more current numbers, but they always lag 1 year. So the interesting part to me about this is that you can clearly see, actually it might be a little bit difficult to see here because the text is so small, but religion is by far the largest there of the ones that are given to, and that's 128 billion. And then you go down through several others like education, human services, giving to foundations, giving to health organizations, and it keeps coming down slightly. But the one that has always carried up the rear has been giving to the environment and giving to animals. And that is that little green slice there at the very top. It's really just $14 billion that's given or was given in 2019. Now it's growing. In fact, 2019 was one of the biggest years that we had, but it has always lagged behind. And I think the reason for that is because we don't recognize the value in the world around us to as significant a degree as we recognize the value really of human relationships. And so one of the things that we have to figure out how to do is to begin talking about trees, talking about the environment in a way that helps people understand the tremendous value that they provide for our lives. So this is about the Arbor Day Foundation, and I know you want to know a little more about the Arbor Day Foundation. Well, it was established in 1972. 1972 happened to be the 100-year anniversary of the Arbor Day holiday that was started in Nebraska. And we have always had had kind of our mission, which is to inspire people to plant, nurture, and celebrate trees. And this is an important mission. And it's one that I want to spend just a moment on because a lot of people get focused on the planting of trees. And we are every bit as guilty of that as anyone else. We get super focused on making sure that we are planting trees and planting trees around the world. But the two second parts of that mission, to be able to nurture and to celebrate trees, are every bit as important. And in fact, are probably more important than just simply planting. Because if we're not getting people to nurture and celebrate, we can't ensure that these trees are going to stay around, that people are going to continue to care for these trees. So we are very focused, not just on the planting side, but making sure that we're also helping people nurture and celebrate. Now, this was the mission since we started in 1972. But we really started taking off when, as an organization, when we adopted a vision. And I'm actually sharing with you the most recent vision, which was just adopted this year. But I can tell you that the vision isn't significantly different. The thing that we've added is the opportunity to relentlessly deliver value. But the first part of it, to lead toward a world where trees are used to solve issues critical to survival, that's been the thing that we recognized was probably our biggest strength. And it's been the way in which we've really taken a look at any problem that's out there. We want to be sure that we're focused on trees. And we know that a lot of organizations can be focused on many different issues, but one of the things that has really led us to our success is that we've been singular-minded about being focused on trees. But we've recognized at the same time that trees are connected to many different issues. And so it's given us a broader audience to be able to talk to, more people that we can converse with about what it means to be focused on trees and what those benefits of trees might be. So this has been the work that we started doing, and it's been since this time that we really saw our work start to take off. And I think it was probably about 10 years ago that we began adopting a vision like this. Okay, so we do most of our work in Nebraska. Drew and I are located in Lincoln, Nebraska, and that is the core of the work, the foundation work, and really the work that we do focused internationally, focused throughout the United States. We also have a focus in Nebraska City. And if you ever want to know why Nebraska City is not the capital, I'd be glad to tell you that story sometime. It involves ice cream, but we are in the capital city. Nebraska City happens to be the home of J. Sterling Morton. And that's the reason that we have really two focuses for our work. And a lot of people go, well, why are you focused on trees in Nebraska? Do you even have any trees in Nebraska? And actually, we do. We have this tree, and Drew and I each take turns going out to water this particular tree. I joke, we actually have more than 300 million trees in Nebraska. We have our own forests as well. We're actually 55th amongst the states because they're also counting territories. So that's a little hurtful to be 55th as far as tree density when you're talking about 50 states out there. But we do have quite a few trees in Nebraska. So as I said, J. Sterling Morton was the founder of Arbor Day in 1872. And we have kind of distanced ourselves more recently from J. Sterling Morton because, like many historical figures, and I'm just going to be straight with you on this, he had some other opinions that maybe were not so popular or are not so popular now. And so we don't try to focus on this, but he had really a lucid thought about trees. And he thought that there should be a day dedicated to celebrating trees. And I think that it's those lucid thoughts that we need to be celebrating. And one of the things that he said was that Arbor Day as a holiday is not like other holidays, because while other holidays repose upon the past, Arbor Day proposes on the future. And I think that's something that really captures the essence, not just of the holiday, but of the work that we do every day. Because when you're planting a tree, you're not just planting something, you might be planting something in memory, but you're planting something that will really stand the test of time and be there for the future. So that's part of the reason that we are focused in Nebraska City. And this is a picture of Arbor Lodge. This was J. Sterling Morton's home. And it's one of the state parks in Nebraska, and there are plenty of oaks around it as well. We have the Morton oak, which I am going to forget how old it is, but what's interesting to me about the Morton oak is that it actually it was there when J. Sterling Morton arrived. It was part of the oak savannas that used to exist across much of the middle of the country and that disappeared even before many of the settlers came across, but we had these large oak savannas. So I think about those and think how majestic they must have been. A lot of our work here is focused in Nebraska City on creating the products that we have. So we have a nursery here. We also have apple trees, and we have our Apple House Market. Unfortunately, we had a problem in the fall. Apple House Market ended up burning down. And so we're in the midst of doing local fundraising within Nebraska to help fund the rebuilding of Apple House Market. But what we like about Nebraska City is that it creates a focal point, it creates an experience. And part of that experience is also Lead Lodge. Lead Lodge is a conference center. It's a place where people can get away, be out amongst the trees, but also have this experience that allows them to see how really trying to live sustainably can work. And so this was a hotel that was built with sustainable technologies in mind. And so that is part of the focus that we're trying to do, is to help people see that there is a way to do this sort of thing in large mass. So, but the other part of it that I think is great, and is the part that my nieces, who are 6, I have twin nieces that are 6, they love the part of this that is really our treehouse adventure. We have an entire park here that is dedicated to getting kids out and exposed to nature. And so for us, this is a huge part of what we do as well, is to give people the experience of being out and amongst the trees. And I would invite any of you that would want to make the trip to come to Nebraska just for this. There's plenty of things to see in Nebraska, but this is an experience, and it's been made ADA accessible as well, because we want everyone to have that ability to be up in the trees and to feel what it's like to be that close to nature. So this is the stuff that we talk about, and we talk about how it's nice to have trees, how trees can make us feel good. And I know that probably many of you have had experiences with trees, and there's a reason that you're on this committee for tree planting and preservation. It's because you probably have memories of trees from your own childhood. That is certainly one of the things that we know that we have to create for young people, is to give them those kind of experiences so they have that ability. But as you well know, it's more than just that. So I want to be challenging you, just like we have been challenging ourselves over the past 4 years, is that we can't just keep thinking about trees as nice to have. They have to be a must have. So the time for trees is now. There has never been another time that's been more important to what we're doing. There's never been another time where we have experienced just the cacophony of different things that have happened all at once. This is a picture of Shasta Trinity National Forest. I'm sure many of you are aware of it. This happens to be one of the places that we're doing some of our work. And of course, it's pretty much in your own backyard. This is the sort of thing that we have taken on, knowing that we need to address issues like this. Anybody that has looked at the news has seen not just these fires, but fires around the world, whether it's Australia, whether it's Brazil. There have been fires around the world, and we know that we have to continue addressing these issues. We also know that it's not just been hot for you where you live, but it's been hot everywhere. The last 5 years have been the hottest years on record. And those temperatures, those excessive temperatures have been creating a real strain on communities and on people and on our trees. It's created situations where we have cities that are now hotter than ever. We have flooding because of climate issues that is taking place not just along our coasts, but in the middle of the United States as well. Flooding that they joke about it being 100-year flooding that's happening every 10 years. Too many of our children are seeing night skies that are lit by fires and playgrounds that are filled with smoke, and pests like emerald ash borer have become a slow-moving epidemic that is just wiping out trees across the United States. Trees are under pressure more than they ever have been at any other time. So this is the time for trees. And this has been an initiative that we launched approximately 4 years ago. And it was an initiative to really plant 100 million trees and to get 5 million new tree planters. Because we know that it's time for this type of work, that this work is imperative right now. And if there was ever a moment for people to come together, that is the time that we're facing right now. This is the time for trees. Because our research friends that we work with at the United States Forest Service, they're reminding us that trees are actually creating healthier communities. They're creating communities with higher densities of tree canopy are actually demonstrating 25% lower rates of childhood asthma than neighborhoods that don't have such tree coverage. In addition, we also know that trees can create healthier and safer communities. Tree-lined boulevards and parks can reduce summer daytime temperatures by 10 degrees. And this being able to reduce temperatures by 10 degrees really can have a magnifying effect. It lowers temperatures, and that creates safer neighborhoods. And this is where a lot of our work is right now in doing work on equity, helping people understand how important trees are to neighborhood equity. In addition to that, drinking water for more than 180 million Americans originates on forest lands and watersheds. And those trees and that drinking water are seeing more pressure and use than ever before. So now is that time. It's the time for trees. Never has our work been more important. So as I said, we started the Time for Trees initiative 4 years ago. This was a bigger effort than we'd ever tried before. And we knew that we had to do something. We wanted to make it significant, and we wanted to stretch ourselves. We didn't just pull the number out of thin air, but at the same time, it was something that we knew was going to stretch our organization like never before. So yeah, the 100 million trees, the 5 million tree planters, and we were going to end it with our anniversary year coming up next year, our 50th anniversary. What I can tell you today is that we've, as of this week, hit 100 million trees. So we've already, within 4 years, hit our goal. And we have had more than 6 million tree planters that we've been able to engage in this time. So a year ahead of schedule, we've been able to get to these goals. And the way that we've been able to do it is because we engage a lot of different groups and a lot of different networks across the United States. So we were already talking about our Tree City USA program. And as I said, that's one of our largest programs. It's one of our oldest programs. We probably have, I want to say, 3,400 cities that are part of the Tree City USA program. So that one gives us a lot of opportunities, and that one's marked in kind of, I should have broken these down into separate slides, but we also have community tree recovery, and that's the light green dots that you see there. Community tree recovery, we're going into communities after any sort of natural disaster. So whether it's forest fire, whether it's flooding, whether it's hurricane, we go in and we can help those communities recover. A lot of people don't realize the importance of trees in helping communities recover, but those trees can become so important, and they give something for the community to rally behind. Because once you get those trees back into those communities, it suddenly starts to feel like a community again. Tree Campus USA, what's not included on here is Tree Campus USA for medical campuses. And so we have those as well. And then our Alliance for Community Trees. And I want to point that one out because we began working with an organization, a nonprofit that really worked with a lot of nonprofits across the United States that were doing tree related work. That nonprofit had some difficulties, realized it wasn't going to be able to continue to do its work, was going to shut down. And we stepped in and said, this is too important to let this go. So we've really assumed the Alliance for Community Trees as part of our network and have brought them under our canopy, so to speak. And what that's done is it's given us a lot of locations around the country. So what it helps us to do is to have a much larger reach into communities to help us understand those communities. But it also is us admitting that we're not always the best to know exactly what each community needs. So those communities can have those groups work for them. This is a look at our membership. And as you can see, this is kind of a heat map. Traditionally, our membership has always been the real basis of our work. We've consistently had a membership of just under 1 million people, and they represent all walks of life and all political persuasions. The other thing I can show you is that right now, we have projects in more than 45 countries around the world. We provide a lot of opportunities for people and partners to engage in our tree planting movement. And this has become more and more significant over the past couple of years. In 2006, we were working in 4 countries. Today, we're working in 45. That sort of growth is important, but it's important to do it right and to do it well. So that's one of the things that we've had to struggle with, figuring out, okay, who are the best organizations, the best tree planting partners for us to continue working with as we try to do these projects around the world. So again, we've engaged more than 100 million trees. We've engaged more than 6 million tree planters. This is important for us. This has been the goal that we wanted to stretch ourselves to do. How have we done that? Well, we've worked a lot with forests. We've tried to engage throughout the United States. This is probably some of our biggest work. And a lot of it has been made possible by corporate partners. This has been probably our area of greatest growth. And this gives me a lot of hope, because if you remember the philanthropy slide that I showed you earlier, corporate philanthropy has always trailed all other giving, and especially individual giving. So if our corporate philanthropy has been leading some of this new growth into this, I know that we're on the verge of seeing some really large impacts as more and more people start making some of their philanthropy about the environment and about giving back to nature. I mentioned that we do a lot of work with communities. Again, we have more than 3,400 communities that have committed to becoming part of Tree City USA, and they've achieved that status by meeting our standards. Now, this gives us a tremendous network, because then we know exactly who we need to call when we have a corporate partner or another donor who comes to us and said, we want to do a project in this area. We want to do a project with this people. It helps us know exactly who our partners are in these areas that help us get this work done. Because again, we are a staff in Lincoln, Nebraska of only 125 people, but we have a reach that goes literally around the world. And we can only do that through our members, through our partners, and through our supporters. One of the things I wanted to point out to you, because I was thinking about you as you were choosing where you were planting your trees, and I know that you have a plan, but this has been one of the really cool projects that we've come up with, and it's called our community canopy. It allows us to do planting of trees on private property. And one of the things I should note about the Arbor Day Foundation is that we are the only tree-based organization that can plant on public lands, on private lands, and within communities. We work across that entire spectrum, whereas most other tree organizations have to naturally focus on one of those. But it's because of our partnerships that allow us to do that. So more than likely, we are partnering with people that are doing these things and focused on this. But here's the thing about our community canopy is that we helped develop this or help fund the development of this iTree tool. And this allows communities to drill down, be able to see exactly where their house is and where they want to plant a tree, choose the tree, and see exactly what the benefits are going to be for their house. Now, when I said we have to figure out ways to get people to value trees, this is the way to do that. Because once people can see exactly what the dollars this is going to do to offset their heating costs or their cooling costs around the year, that's the way for a lot of people to begin going, okay, trees really do have a value beyond their aesthetic beauty. And maybe it's worth it for me to have to rake leaves in the fall. So this is the type of work we do, and we work throughout communities. And what we've learned is that it brings people together. People love to do this type of work. And this is why a lot of corporations have decided to work with us and become corporate partners, is because their own employees love this type of work. It's a feeling of giving back. And we truly believe that trees create community in ways that a lot of other things simply can't come close, because we get emotionally attached to trees. I can tell you, my wife's mother is in a facility. She's having some issues with dementia and has had some difficult times. One of her worst days over the past year was when we had a huge wind, and it came through. The wind ended up knocking down a tree that was right outside her window. And any number of things can knock people off their game. But this tree being down, and it took us a long time to figure out what it was, but this tree being knocked over totally ruined her day. because it was something that she always expected to be there. It was something that she could rely on. And that's the sort of thing that I think trees become for a lot of us. We can walk by them and think and really not give them a thought because they've always been there. But when they're not there, that's when it really hurts. And it can really make a huge impact on a community. The great thing is that this is something that appeals to all ages. So at the end of 2019, we had the experience of working with some YouTube personalities by the name of Mr. Beast and Mark Rober. And if you've never heard those names before, you're like me. I was not aware of these individuals, but they decided they wanted to plant 20 million trees, and they wanted to do it in less than 2 months. And so they were talking about doing it at $1 per tree. And I heard this and heard that we were going to be trying, and I thought, this is crazy. This is not how you do this sort of thing. It takes a lot longer to get people engaged, to get people focused on this. Within the first 2 weeks, we had raised half of the 20 million that they engaged YouTube personalities across YouTube. It has become the largest event, philanthropic event on YouTube ever. And what it did was it got young people talking to their parents about wanting to plant trees. This changed the way we thought about what the future is going to look like, because these young people were so focused. And I will tell you that one of the reasons that my son wears that Arbor Day hat, one of the reasons he was so proud that I was part of this organization, is that he was so excited about this movement. Because for these young people, it was not them having to wait around for adults to do something. They could take action. They could do something. They had the ability to do something that surprised even their parents and grandparents. And it was fantastic. We had more than 800,000 people participate. The average gift was $5. And in less than 2 months, we raised 22,000. This number I'm using an old slide. This number is not updated. So this is what it means to really get people engaged in tree planting. And this is what we do with all of our tree planting partners, is we find ways that we can get people excited, that we can get people engaged, and that we can bring impact to the efforts that people are trying to do locally. And what that's done for us is it's given us a truly global perspective, because this success that we've had, this hitting this 100 million mark, this being able to raise this 20 million off of a YouTube effort, what that meant is that we suddenly had to plant a lot of trees in a very short time period. And as an organization, we can now, so to speak, see the forest for the trees. The experience of the past few years of increasing our planting capacity has helped us recognize that the biggest issue facing any tree planting organization right now is, how do you build capacity? When we start talking about doing onetree.org, when we start talking about doing 1 trillion trees, the thing that we're facing is, how do we do it? And you, as I said before, have touched on this. You've gone through the process of collecting acorns. You've gone through the process of holding those acorns, getting them ready, planting them, figuring out where to plant them. That is the biggest challenge going forward. We sometimes joke that trees don't grow on trees. I mean, this is a tough process. There's a lot of overhead, so to speak, when you start talking about trees. So last year we planted 14 million trees, and that was That was more than we had planted in the previous 8 years combined. This year, we planted 34 million trees. And that meant we were planting all around the world and taking up every last bit of supply. And what we know now is that for us to reach the levels of planting that onetree.org and other governmental organizations want to hit, is that we have to increase the capacity all across the board. According to a study that was recently done, US seedling production is currently around 1.3 billion a year, which means adding 30 billion trees by 2040 would actually require us to increase our annual production by 1.7 billion seedlings. That's a 2.3-fold increase, and it would raise the total production to 3 billion baby trees. That's a lot, and you have to have somewhere to put them. So boosting seedling production will require expanding tree nurseries. It's going to mean increasing the tree industry's workforce, increasing seed collection and storage capacity, and it's going to mean improving both our pre and post-planting practices. These are big, big efforts that we have to make, and it's not going to be easy. And what we have to be thinking about is how we can support our planting partners, not just this year, not how we can help them meet what they need to do this year, but how we can really do this for the next 5 years or 10 years, because that's what it's going to take for them to really increase their production and be able to do this. So I like this picture, and I'm going to end with this picture because what it really demonstrates to me is what tree planting is. It's about generations. It's about uniting people. It's about bringing people together. It's a non-political opportunity to do good. Trees are not divisive. Trees are not something that divide people. And we need to be finding more opportunities within our country to come together around issues that we can all agree on. And in working together, side by side, arm in arm, to get some of these types of projects done, perhaps we will gain a better understanding of one another, and those benefits will last well into the future. So I want to thank you. Again, I think the work that you're doing is fabulous. What you've done there is great, and keep going. Just keep going, whether it's with us or anyone else that might be doing this type of work. I would just encourage you that this is so needed right now, that you just need to keep pushing and pressuring and working with your own city council members and other government officials. This is important work, and it's needed more now than ever. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, James, for presenting this important work for us. And now we can entertain questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand electronically, and finally you can raise your hand physically. But the first question I have coming from Carol Weed, and you can also unmute yourselves if you have a question. But from Carol, she asks, is planting in recent forest fire zones a good idea? Question mark.
That's Carol, that is really a great question, and probably something I should have clarified as I was talking. We don't go immediately into any forest fire zone to do any sort of replanting immediately. What happens, and this happens, I will say that this happens not only with forest fires, but with hurricanes, with a lot of other types of natural disaster, tornadoes. We wait. I mean, we will call them immediately and say, look, we're aware of the situation that you're dealing with. When you are ready, we'll be here. Now, that does put us at a disadvantage, because the time that people want to give and help support efforts like this is right at the time immediately after a natural disaster happens. We have a short attention span sometimes, and we forget that these things continue. So planting typically takes place long after, and what we have to do when we are looking at forest fires in particular is we have to assess whether we need to come in and do replanting in that area. Because if the fire wasn't as bad, the natural regrowth is going to be way better for that area than if we went in and tried to replant it ourselves. We will prioritize natural regrowth when that's a possibility, because that creates a healthier forest. But the problem that we've had is that forests, and this has been particularly true of some areas in California, they have burned so hot that they've burned well down into the ground. And that heat has destroyed the ability for those forests to regenerate naturally. And so you do need to come in and do that work. But again, because of how devastating that can be and how hot that area can be, you don't go in right away. So it's a great question. We don't move in right away, but we work with the U.S. Forest Service to determine when we can go in, and private landowners for that matter. Dale. No, sorry.
Yeah,
ahead,
sure.
Barry.
Go ahead, Dale.
Oh, okay, thank you. James, my wife and I had two experiences in the area of Mount St. Helens. We went there sometime after the the explosion, and saw the devastation and just everything gone. And then I don't remember how many years later it was, but we went in, and as we were driving in, we would have never guessed that that area had been totally destroyed. Weyerhaeuser planted, and I think the government too, replanted, and it was amazing, the results of that. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Drew, do you know if we might have been involved with any of that?
I almost pulled the James and forgot to unmute myself. Actually, I actually don't believe that we were. At that point, as a foundation, I believe we were solely more of an educational and more of a membership-based organization. But really what sparked us to get into large-scale reforestation, I believe, was the Yellowstone complex fires. And since then, those efforts have grown significantly.
Okay. Brad, why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Okay. First of all, thank you, James, Andrew, for your time and the presentation. It's much appreciated. I've got a multi-part question. I'm guessing you find that you're more successful in planting more trees cheaper in some countries than others. But I'm also guessing you probably have a pretty good guesstimate of what it costs you on average to plant a tree. And you mentioned $1, but is that appropriate? And how much does that vary from one part of the world to another?
It can vary quite a bit. And in fact, it's one of the things that we struggle with. And Brad, it's a fantastic question. Again, I only briefly touched on it, but it's part of how we value trees. And we might have been playing into the problem in part ourselves by talking a lot about $1 per tree, because what that does is, in a lot of people's minds, it sticks there as being, oh, well, that's what it costs to plant a tree. Well, in some cases, it's even cheaper than that. You know, in some cases, we can do it for 23 cents or 30 cents, but we have focused on $1 being something that averages out pretty well. But that said, that makes it very difficult when we have to go and begin talking to a potential partner about tree planting opportunities that are going to cost quite a bit more. So, for instance, like I said, we do a lot of work in cities. Drew would tell you that planting in Central Park is one of the more expensive places to plant. And if anybody's interested in doing that, it seems to get cost prohibitive pretty quickly. But you have another one right in your own backyard with
Golden
with
Gate Park,
well, Redwood Forest, yeah.
right?
You're looking at tree planting efforts that are going to be, you know, $80, $90 per tree in that area. And that becomes difficult for us. And so to some degree, we have to be very careful about how we talk about tree planting. And it's also part of the reason that we're talking now about what the challenges are that lie before us. Because if we're going to talk about planting 3 trillion tree or a trillion trees, sorry, if we're going to talk about planting 1 trillion trees, then that's not just about getting those plants in the ground. It's really about building up the capacity for the nurseries in some of these areas of the world that don't have that capacity. And we're very fortunate in the United States to have the capacity that we do. But in some areas around the world, we just don't have that capacity. And so we're going to have to start making those types of investments. So the initial outlay for planting trees in some of these areas at the scale that we really need to be planting them is going to be higher. And that's the sort of thing that we have to do a better job of articulating as we move forward. Because what many of us have done in the tree planting world is that we've perpetuated a race to the bottom as far as cost, because we've competed with one another to the point that we've said, oh, look, we can plant this area for cheaper. And so it's like playing name that tune, and pretty soon none of us can name that tune. So.
Right. But I would expect and hope that when you're talking to potential donors in a specific area, especially if it's a fairly high cost specific area, they probably understand that they're living in a high cost area, and you won't be able to plant a trees there for $1. It may be 25, 50, it may be more. And they probably get that.
They do. And I think it's a challenge for us. So for instance, I can give you a very specific example here. Just recently for us, we have a donor that's in the Omaha area, and she's very fond of the organization, and she is one that pounds the gavel on the table about how much is spent on philanthropy for environmental issues. She thinks more people should be doing that. Well, she has funded a lot of our work in and around the Omaha area, and we have a tree planting coming up later, well, actually this next month in May. And the prices for the trees, we've had a perfect storm because we had this cold snap of weather that came across the United States combined with COVID, and it set back our the tree nurseries significantly. So there's fewer trees, greater demand, and suddenly the cost jumped for that project. And she'd already committed to that. Well, our team had a real soul searching kind of moment where we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Do we go back to her and say, okay, this actually is going to cost more? And I will just tell you that we're still working through that. I'm a proponent of going back and saying it costs more, but it's a tough conversation to have if you've made a commitment to someone to plant trees at a certain amount. And it can be, all of us, I think, want to maintain our word on these things. And we don't want unexpected situations like this to come up. But with trees, it just happens, that trees, you run into this in a lot more situations than you would say, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say than you would building a building, but it seems like costs go up when you build a building, no matter what. So,
Right. And I would,
Can I touch on that a second too?
Sure, yeah.
One thing that I was just going to point out as well is the difference in cost domestically versus internationally. James touched on how lucky we are to have the nurseries that we do, the resources that the USDA puts into the U.S. Forest Service. So a lot of times our costs here are a lot lower internationally. There may be much more overhead than we do here domestically because we're paying wages for the workers. We're paying for overhead costs of the actual nurseries themselves. So a lot of people think, oh, well, you have a project somewhere in Africa. Those trees should be 5 cents. Things are very cheap to make there. Not necessarily the case because we're paying living wages to people. We're helping set up new or upgrading current nurseries, and there's just a lot more that goes into it. So it really varies.
Yeah, and I actually mentioned this. So Drew, you just reminded me. I mentioned this to Lois when we were talking. One of the things that our CEO has said, we were asked at one event by one of our members, well, are we doing anything to advocate for like changes in Brazil to how they mandate that the forests are handled? And he had a very perceptive comment, and he would be glad to hear me saying that about him, I think. But he said, the thing about it is that you can't just mandate these changes. You can't legislate these changes, because if it's a choice for someone between getting food on their table and cutting down a tree, they're going to make the choice of getting the food on the table for their family. And so what we have to do is to really change the circumstances on the ground. So we have to make trees not just, a nice to have, again, as we say, but something that is really legitimately part of their ability to sustain themselves and to get by. And so that creates a different kind of investment.
Okay, I'm going to, thank you, James.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a follow-up question from Carol. Do you have any opinion about the tree planting drones in Australia?
You want to take this one, Drew?
As James referenced, we're all about everybody doing as much good as possible for the environment and trees. We have partnered with a drone tree planting company here in the United States called Drone Seed. We are just cautious on seeing the results first. There's a lot of trouble with getting those seeds to actually germinate. There's a lot of trouble with getting those seeds not to just roll down the side of whatever hill or mountain they're being dropped on and collecting in one riverbed, and you have thousands or tens of thousands of seeds in one place. So we're hopeful and excited about the technology, but the efficacy of it is just not quite there yet to be mass funded or mass invested in.
It's also an issue of jobs too. If there is the opportunity for people to have jobs related to planting trees, that's again another thing that helps people see the value in trees. So we all know automation is coming, but so this is one where I think it's important to have our own hands in the dirt.
Very good, thank you. Dale?
Yes, there are places in the world where, as you know, where they're cutting trees down in order to expand agricultural areas, I would assume that you would run into a lot of resistance if you were trying to talk people into planting trees there.
Right. And so what we're doing in a lot of areas, and one of the programs that I didn't touch on is our coffee program. And so if you go to our website, you can look up our coffee program. And what we try to encourage is shade grown coffee. Now, we are trying to expand outside of just coffee, but begin looking into a lot of areas of agroforestry, because there are a lot of reasons that trees can actually help. And if you're planting the right types of trees for that area, they can actually increase the nitrogen within the soil and not choke out some of the agriculture that you're trying to do. Plus, if you're planting certain types of fruit trees, that adds another level of another food source that might be available. So, but it's a balance again, right? So you have to hit that balance to where people can not only survive, but feel like they're thriving. And that's the thing that we're working hard to try and encourage. And we're working with a lot of different groups that are thinking about that. We're not the experts when it comes to every area around the world. And so this is why we work really hard to find the people in those areas. And so whether it's in the United States, whether it's in different neighborhoods of different demographics, or whether it's in remote areas of the world that we don't have as many relationships, we're looking for the people who really understand the issues, know what's going to appeal, and what's going to make the difference about whether somebody actually values that tree and makes it part of their life.
Okay.
Go ahead, Drew.
Thank you, James. Oh,
I was just going to add to that by addressing Dale's comment and saying that it's also a concern or a point to make the tree valuable to that person, or make trees valuable to that landowner. I mean, we can go into someone who's been farming a certain kind of crop along the Mississippi River and say, look, this has been your crop yield over a certain number of years. This is how much money you've gotten from it. We have so many corporations these days, and even individuals are looking to offset their carbon emissions. We can go in and plant this many hectares or acres of trees on your land, and we can sell those carbon credits for you, and you'll make X dollars. So it's all about incentivizing people to do the right thing, as long as it makes sense for them personally.
right. Thank you. Brad, you had another question?
Actually, more of a request. I'm guessing, James, that there are times when you'll go in to talk to a community about doing a tree planting project, and you realize that because of the culture there, that you should charge them a premium. My request is, since I'm originally from and a graduate of University of Michigan, I hope if you do a project for Ohio State, you charge them more than you would us, because they're even bigger assholes and arrogant assholes than we are.
Okay.
You laugh because you know it's true.
As members of the Big Ten, we really can't comment on that.
But I do have another question about that cat in back of you.
Yes.
Hi, Max.
Toby.
Okay.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay, Carol, you had another question?
Yes, it's as much a comment as a question. I'm bothered by your comment of using tree planting as a carbon offset for companies. I understand that from your perspective, that's a good idea, but having pollution continue in places where these polluters are, having an excuse, bothers some of us. What's your position on that?
Myself personally, I can't speak for the whole Arbor Day Foundation. It kind of goes back to the theory or kind of a working theory within the carbon markets of additionality, which is to say, is what you're doing as far as tree planting going to cause a greater benefit than what would happen if you didn't? And so my personal opinion is yes, organizations, large corporations are polluting way too much, and there should be action around that. But because of that, we shouldn't just say no when they necessarily want to do something positive. I guess I'm just of the mindset that I would rather work with them to try and do something positive than to not do anything at all and just have them keep polluting and not trying to improve anything. But I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Carol.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and the other thing that I would just add to that is that what we have noticed is carbon offsets. Once companies start talking about that, and once they start engaging us on that, then they begin looking at other issues as well. So it becomes, once they're feeling good about having done this thing, they're always wanting to look for what's next. And we've run into several companies who have started coming to us less and less simply because they started looking at this issue and realizing that they could actually be reducing their pollution in the first place. And so they wouldn't have to be spending this money on the back end, that there are actually more cost-effective ways for them to reduce the pollution at the start. So I think once it gets the conversation started, it's actually something that can be very beneficial down the road to get people moving that direction. But people have to start feeling good. They have to feel like they're doing something before they'll do more. And that's the thing that we find has worked really well for us over time. But I let Drew take that because he and I we tend to be of the same minds on a lot of these issues like this. And I would say that within the foundation, you will find people that, very, very greatly on a lot of different issues. We are an organization that's made up of a lot of individuals with very different perspectives. Right now, this is our focus, and we know that we're able to have some positive impact here. So we're going to pursue it and see if we can continue to have that same sort of positive impact.
Good answer.
Okay. Well, James, thank you Andrew, thank you so much for coming to Rossmore via Zoom and sharing with us your thoughts. And we're looking forward to a fruitful relationship with you as we continue in various endeavors, and we'll keep you posted on how we're doing. And I know you have us on your calendar or on your list of places to visit now that you know about us.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Dale, did you have one last question?
Yeah, Barry, I was wondering, I noticed you're recording this. Will this be on channel 28? Is there a possibility that it could be on 28 and a lot of people here could benefit from it?
Well, if you have influence in that regard, we can certainly make it available to channel 28. But we have not spoken to them ahead of time, as far as I know. But we can look into that.
I'm going to be careful now about how I say what I'm going to say, since I know it's being recorded. But
I apologize for not mentioning that ahead of time.
No, it's fine. What I was going to say here is I sent Lois some membership sign up sheets, and I would encourage you, if you are interested in signing up, to go that route, because those will be sent directly to my attention, to our team's attention at the foundation. And the rationale behind that is that we actually work with a group called the Oak Society. And what we try to do is to provide more special attention. And this one here wants more special attention too right now, so I apologize for that. But we try to give more attention. And the other route, if you were to sign up simply online, is fine. But you will then be in our main direct mail stream. And I can't be held responsible for what you receive then once you're in the main direct mail stream. But I can be held responsible for what you get from us directly. So if you decide you want to go that route, please let us know, and Drew and I will make sure that we give you that sort of special attention that we think you deserve here. So with all the work you're doing, it's fantastic.
I appreciate it. I know I'm a member already, and I'm getting too much mail from Arbor
I'll
Day.
take a look at that.
So
Barry.
that'll
See
be
if I can do something
appreciated.
for you. Yeah.
Yes, Dale?
Yeah, I was going to go online, James. So how can I do it the way that you just mentioned? Is there an email address?
It sounds,
something?
yeah.
Yeah, so I sent some to Lois. Lois has copies of it, and it would just be mailing it back to me at the foundation then. So,
Mhm.
and it's a
Yeah.
very simple form. So,
And how do I get the form, Lois?
You have to unmute yourself, Lois.
Dale, is going to cost you $50.
I can probably, get it. I'll get it to you.
Okay. Do you, James, do you have it as a PDF? Would that work?
I think I do have it as a PDF. Let me see here.
I like to use trees for other uses than their paper value.
Yeah, I agree. The only difficulty is that I put this together over the weekend, so I don't think it's a fillable PDF.
That's okay. I can.
But would you like me to send that to? Would you have
Yeah.
like a mailing list that you would like me to send it to, or how would you like me to do that?
Well, if you have a PDF, we can send it certainly to the people that came to here. It's just easier than mailing back and forth. I think it'll
Okay.
turn around faster as well.
Okay, so here's what I will do is I will forward the PDF. So Lois has it, but I'll forward it to both you and Bruce as well, since I have your email addresses, and then
Great.
you can make sure it gets out to everyone.
Will do. Okay.
And Barry,
Yes, Brian.
I think what we ought to do is we should, when we've got the recording, the Zoom recording, and we can, host it someplace, make a link to it, send it out to our entire, the 400 people on our disk list, along with the PDF for
Okay.
the membership form.
Very good. Okay, we'll do that. So we'll get it out to 400 people for you.
Well, thank you.
And it's even better than that. It's 400 environmentalists. So
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, like I said, really impressed with the work that you're doing. And I know that you've gone to a lot of research in just seeing what types of ways that we're going to do the drawdown are. So I applaud you for doing all of that sort of work
And
to
we
really
applaud your
understand.
work as well.
So,
Yeah, thanks again, James and Drew.
yes,
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
well, thank you guys, and have a happy Arbor Day.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
Okay.
right.
Take care.
I know. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.